Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly message. Let's begin by quoting together Psalms 1. Blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sit in the seat of scoffers. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree firmly planted by the streams of water, which yields its fruit in its season. Its leaf does not wither, and in whatever he does he prospers. The wicked are not so, but they are like the chaff which the wind drives away. Therefore the wicked will not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the assembly of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the wicked will perish. Well, we're still in the middle of trying to find a way to respond to all that's going on in our culture. It's been an interesting journey, hasn't it? So a lot of times we put things one way and then we go back and look at it and try to change our perspective a little bit and put it in another way. And I've been talking about how does a Christian respond to the coronavirus times? How do we respond? I gave you 3 words last week: prepare, proclaim, and persevere. I'm going to give you 3 other words this week, words that are very similar, but just bring just a little different perspective to the whole idea of how we're here to respond. Stay, focus, and endure. Very similar words to the other 3. Prepare, proclaim, persevere. Stay, focus, endure. The passage of Scripture came from our daily reading from the Year Through the Bible program that many of us have been reading through, from Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. And it's just that this line jumped off the page at me, and I thought I want to spend some time thinking and talking about that. Here it is, Hebrews 12, 1 and 2. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith. That's it. That's the verse. That's the verse I want to talk to you about today. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Let's consider this first part. Let us run the race. Let us run the race. When all this started back in March, for me anyhow, I probably started a little bit earlier, but back in March when all this started, and I still remember hearing Dr. Fauci talk on the news about that archaic practice of shaking hands. And something jumped off the page, out of that message to me. It was like, that is just like archaic, shaking hands, taking a person's hands and shaking hands. And he said, I hope that we're done with that forever. And it's like I thought something is really underneath all of this. There's something going on here. I don't think we're fighting against flesh and blood. That's not the issue. I'm trying to discern the spiritual battle that's underneath for all of us. And the spiritual battle, the real battle, I came up with some words here. I think the enemy is trying to get us isolated. We need one another. But one of the things that all this has happened to us is this whole word isolation. Isolation happens when we social distance. Isolation happens when we wear masks. Isolation. Isolating ourselves from one another. And I think that's the real battle. We're dealing with the battle against isolation and communication, the ability to communicate, and then ultimately fear. Fear. There's the battle that we have to face. We can give into it. We can give into that battle and choose. And I have to fight that battle every day. Believe me, it's a war. Even just going out of the house, going to the grocery store, even going to church. So many people have stopped going to church and getting used to just turning on the TV or a computer or whatever, that it becomes It's so easy not to go out and face the battle. But we need to face the battle. Our world needs us to face the battle. Our world needs us to run this race. Our response, first of all, is found in this word stay. Stay involved. Stay involved. Find a way to stay involved. I don't care whether you wear a mask or not. Stay involved. Stay involved in the world around us. Stay involved in people's lives. Or run the race. Run the race. That's what we're called to do, is run this race. Stay involved and run the race. That passage of scripture goes on to say this: run the race with endurance that is set before us. The race God set before us. That's right. God has set this race before us. This is no surprise to him. This is our time to shine. God has set this race before us. We must stay involved because God has set this race for us. In the book of Esther, when she was asked by her uncle Mordecai to go to the king, her husband, and approach him, and she said, I haven't been called, I haven't been summoned into the king's presence. And you know the law is that if anybody walks into the king's presence without being summoned, they are putting their life on the line. And out of this whole interaction came this famous verse from Esther, where Mordecai said to her, "And who knows whether you have not obtained royalty for such a time as this?" For such a time as this. Listen, my friends, we must run this race. The race that God has set before us. This is our time. We are here not by accident. It's for such a time as this that we exist. And even though much of the world that we've known is changing and turning away from God, we need to stay and be bright lights. We need to stay. We need to stay and run this race. Who knows whether you've not attained royalty for such a time as this? Who knows that this is not the time, or if this is the time that you and I are here to shine and we are needed? I don't think this is the time for crowds and crowds of people. This is the time for individual Christians who love their God to shine brightly in the midst of a dark generation. This is our time. Run the race that God has set before us. And then here's this word, with endurance. Run the race with endurance. Endurance is something our culture has almost lost sight of. We see it sometimes among football players and football games and professional sports people. But we don't really train our children in endurance much anymore. But there's something about that quality of endurance that we need to grasp onto and we need to cultivate and put in our lives. The old King James word for patience is this: long suffering. Long suffering. Endurance, a dictionary definition for the word endurance is, it's the fact or the power of enduring an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way, without quitting. Our world needs people who will demonstrate endurance in this difficult time. We keep going. We don't give up. We quit. We don't quit. Stay, focus, and endure. And I'm going to talk about that word focus in just a minute. The fact or power of enduring an unpleasant or difficult process or situation without giving way. Don't give away. Don't give up. Don't give in to isolation and fear and lack of communication. Stay. Be involved. Hebrews 10:36 says this. This is going to be your favorite verse. I want you to put this up on your refrigerator, okay? Hebrews 10:36. For you have need of endurance. For you have need of endurance, so that when you have done the will of God, you may receive what was promised. That's what we're waiting for. That's what we're rooting for. That's what we're holding on for. Because God has promised. And just when it seems like we're ready to quit, we don't quit. We don't give up. We endure to the end. And we will see the victory that God has for us. Let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. And then here's the focus part. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. I ran into someone the other day who was talking about this thing you learn when you become a motorcycle rider. Wherever you fix your eyes on, that's where you're going to go. Wherever you fix your eyes on, that's where you're going to go. And this passage of Scripture reminds us, fix our eyes on Jesus. Don't look at the government. Don't look at politics. Don't look at medical science. Look at Jesus. I'm not saying those things don't have a validity, but we have to look higher than that. We have to look to Jesus. We need to be asking all the time, Jesus, what are you doing? I can't help but think about it when I think about fixing our eyes on Jesus. This passage of Scripture from Matthew chapter 14, verses 28 through 30. You'll be familiar with the scene because it's probably one of the best known or talked about passages in all of Scripture. It's when Jesus sent his disciples ahead to the other side of the lake in a boat by themselves, and he went up to pray. And when they were halfway out, they were way out on the lake, and it was nighttime, Jesus came walking to them on the water. They were all frightened and thought it was seeing a ghost. And Jesus called out to them. He said, don't be afraid, it's me. And then Peter, you know, the guy always puts his foot in his mouth. He always opens his mouth and says things. He said, Lord, if that's you, bid me to come to you. And I just imagine Jesus smiled a big old smile and said, well, come. This is what it says. Lord, if that's you, command me to come to you in the water. And Jesus said, come. And Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came toward Jesus. What an incredible thing. But then this is what it says. But seeing the wind, he became frightened and began to sink. And he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he was walking on water. But the minute he stopped and began to look around, what am I doing here? He looked at the wind. In some translation adds the words, and the waves. He looked at the obstacles. He looked at the impossibility of what he was doing. Instead of keeping his eyes on Jesus, he looked at the problems. And when he saw that, he began to sink. Help, Lord, save me. Jesus reached out his hand, grabbed onto Peter, and he said these words, why did you doubt? Why did you doubt? Don't look at the waves. Don't look at the problems. Don't look at your fears. Don't look at the virus. Look at Jesus. He'll get us through. He's got us. And we'll do the impossible if we just keep our eyes on Jesus. Fix our eyes on Jesus. Let me read this passage one more time. Let us run with endurance. Let us run, brothers and sisters. Let us run with endurance. Endurance, there's the word. The race that is set before us. Let us stay involved. That is set before us. Fixing our eyes on Jesus. Who are we looking at? What are we looking at? Are we looking at news reports? Are we looking at death counts? Or are we looking at Jesus? In Hebrews, it goes on and it says this about Jesus. Who for the joy set before him. It's not that Jesus is asking us to do something that he didn't do. He did the same thing. He had to fix his eyes on the prize, the joy that was set before him. And it says, for the joy set before him, he endured the cross. What was the joy set before him? You and I. He went to the cross for us. That was what was set before him. I imagine there were times where he thought, I don't really want to do this. But he knew that dying on the cross meant that you and I would become changed and forgiven and join him. And that was the joy set before him. You're the joy set before him. It was for you that he endured the cross. It was for you that he endured. We were the prize he fixed his eyes on. He's the prize we fix our eyes on. For consider him who has endured such hostility. Hebrews 12, 2 and 3. It's all found in that same passage. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary. You will not grow weary and lose heart. My friends, let's fix our eyes on Jesus. Let's get our eyes off the problems, get our eyes off the wind and the waves, and let's fix our eyes on Jesus. He'll get us through. How are we to respond in these coronavirus times? I like these 3 words. Stay. Stay involved. Focus. Focus on Jesus. Endure. Don't give up. Persevere. Endure. And we'll win the prize. God bless you. Let's say the 23rd Psalm together. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. God bless you.